It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm.
A warm welcome and a special, very good evening to everyone, to all our viewers, all our listeners, our audience, our attendees. Thank you very, very much for being here with us this Sunday evening, rainy Sunday evening here on Monkey Mountain. You can see right behind me, but but nevertheless, the warm spirit of the theater and of the Department of Creative and Festival Arts here in Trinidad and Tobago. I am Dr. Travis Weeks, lecturer in theater at the DCFA, which is what we call the department for short. And my co-host is Carol Hussain. Carol Hussain will be my co-host. She's also a lecturer, an adjunct lecturer at the DCFA. Of course, today we are going to be discussing Dream on Monkey Mountain by Derek Walcott. And this play we have decided is a Caribbean theater classic. And without going into any heavy academic discourse, I am going to leave you with the practitioners, with people who have experienced that play, who have performed in that play, who have worked on that play. We have some brilliant and experienced expertise here with us, practitioners who will speak to praxis. And of course, we will also discuss the very important issues that are stimulated by this Caribbean classic. So I really look forward to this, and I look forward to your participation. We have a segment organized where you, the audience, would be able to pose questions through a chat to our esteemed panel, who will respond to you as well. At this point, I have the honor and the pleasure, and I hope the blessing as well, to invite the head of department, Mr. Louis McWilliams, who's also the theater coordinator, to deliver a few remarks. Welcome, Mr. McWilliams.
Thank you all, and I want to say a warm welcome on behalf of the Department of Creative and Festival Arts at the University of the West Indies to all of you that are tuned in here this evening, or whatever time it is in the part of the world that you are at. But I also want to say a big thank you to the panelists. When I looked at the panelists, as Dr. Weeks says, esteemed panelists and all solid theater practitioners who would have worked with the late Derek Walcott in his time and worked on this play, Dream on Monkey Mountain, it is a pleasure to have you guys here. And this work that is being done and initiated by Dr. Weeks, which focuses on the theater classics of the Caribbean. I think this is going to be an ongoing series, and as one, I think we could look forward to having much more discourse, as I think we need at this point in terms of the work that our pioneers would have done, and for all our students who do Caribbean theater history, this is a vital point, a vital thing for this. So I want to thank Dr. Weeks for taking this initiative and embarking on this project. And as he rightly said earlier, it's a DCFA project with the initiative by Dr. Weeks, and it is going to be hosted by Dr. Weeks and Carol Hussain, as he says. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'll just tell you a little bit about Dr. Weeks, right? Well, he's St. Lucian, and he's an award-winning actor, poet, playwright, director, and also a cultural critic. He studied at UWI Mona, doing theater at Jamaica School of Drama, cultural studies at Cave Hill campus. Yeah. He focuses right now a lot on the Creole traditions and the discourse and the work of the late Derek Walcott, Nobel Prize winner. And he uses this research to develop innovative dramatic approach to his own theater practice, both as a playwright and director. right? His work is powered by the Creole language and the traditions of his native St. Lucia. At the moment, as he said earlier, he's a lecturer at the Theatre Arts Department, and just recently published two of his plays, The Fight for Bellevue and The Field of Power. And there's so much more I could say about Dr. Weeks, but we would not go further with that. And then his co-host this evening, Carol Hossain, a versatile young lady, writer, artist, poet, educator, editor. She holds a BA in theatre arts and carnival studies, MPhil in cultural studies. She's done a postgrad in diploma in education. And she's one of my go-tos in terms of some of the work that we do here at the CFA. So it's really a pleasure. It's really a pleasure having these two members of staff on board and initiating this project. So I don't want to talk much again. I want to just say welcome. Welcome. I'm extremely proud that this kind of event is happening, and is a really a nice way to spend a Sunday evening listening to theatre practitioners talk about great works that were done and what we consider classics. So I want to hand you over now to Dr. Weeks and Carol Hossain, who will take you through the proceedings. I will take off my mic and become an audience member and sit back and enjoy this. So, Travis, over to you. Your ball. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Louis Mark Williams. Well, at this point, we have to introduce our guests. Yeah, the most important people here this evening. And yes, so I'm going to ask Carol to introduce our first guest first. Carol Hossain.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, with the panel. I'm really, really excited about this. So I want to start off with Mr. Albert Laveau. And there's so much that we can say about Mr. Laveau, he's 86. This year he turned 86. So that's a long history there, especially in theater. So just to give you a little rundown, and for those of you who may not know, and I think many people may not know, I want to give you a background. So Mr. Laveau is the directing chairman, the executive chairman of the Trinidad Theatre Workshop presently. But where he is now, and he's been chief cook and bottle washer for many, 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 many decades. But I just want to give you a little background on him. He really was introduced to acting in a theater company around 1953. And that would have been the Carnegie Players, who had their playhouse. They used to use the library in San Fernando, Carnegie Library. And he was introduced to the Carnegie Players through Joyce Curtin. And through Joyce, he also met other stalwarts in our theater industry and the early founders of our industry, people like Errol Jones and so. And they, so I'm trying to give you the short version. It's a very exciting story. So the long and short is Mr. Laveau was acting lead roles and so in San Fernando, where he came, where he was born, grew up in San Fernando, but he was working in North. So when he got married, both he and his wife were working in North, and eventually in 1961, they decided they're gonna move up North and rent an apartment, live there. And through Miss Curtin, he was introduced to the company of players. And there he really got into the performance on a bigger scale. And from there, he met with the Little Carib Theatre Workshop. And Derek Walcott was working out of the Little Carib Theatre Workshop. And from there was a split, and you had the formation of the Basement Theatre. So that's a big, big, long history I'm giving you in just a little nutshell, not wanting to take up too much time, So Mr. Laveau is a stalwart name that is renowned in the theatre industry in Trinidad and Tobago. And we owe him a great debt for his dedication to theatre He spent his life, more than 60 years, dedicated, not thinking about money and this and that and the other, but his focus is on growing the theater industry through the School of the Arts at the TTW, and we want to thank him for that. So he will say more of himself later. I really don't want to take too much more time. So Travis.
Yes, thank you, Carol. And at this point, I will have to speak about Dr. Carol LaChapelle. And this is a name that I've known for a very, very long time. There's some names in the theater, in dance and choreography you hear, you hear about Beryl McBurney and Rex Nettleford, and you also about Carol LaChapelle, Dr. Carol LaChapelle. Well, Carol LaChapelle is an award-winning choreographer and dance educator. LaChapelle holds a PhD from the University of Trinidad and Tobago and a Master of Arts from the University of the West Indies. She's a graduate of the London College of Dance and Drama, Dartford College of Education, University of London, and the artistic director of the LaChapelle Dance Company of Trinidad and Tobago. She has served on the executive and as term president of the NDA, on the board of management of Queen's Hall, as a Best Village Judge and dance director of the Trinidad Theatre Workshop. She has collaborated with Elizabeth Bergman at Harvard University, Greta Mendez, MBA UK, and Geraldine Corner of Carnival Messiah fame, among others. Awards include 5 CASIC Awards for Choreography, Best Actress, the President's Award for Excellence in the Arts, the National Dance Association Emeritus Award and International Women's Award for Pioneering Women, awarded by the NWAC for outstanding contribution to development in the arts. The Rotary Award for Culture, National Cultural Legends Award 2019. Dr. LaChapelle served as arts coordinator and assistant professor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago on the Diploma in Education team at the UWI, an MA supervisor at APE UTT. What work, very good. Thank you, we are very honored and pleased to have you. Welcome, Dr. Carol LaChapelle. All right, Carol, our next guest.
I want to introduce Alison Garrett-Seapol, and Alison, I've known her for many years, and I'm thinking about her, and I said, I can't remember seeing Alison ever have the emotion of displeasure on her face. Alison is always ever pleasant. I don't know how she manages it. So I'm just going to go through her bio, right? Alison has been working with the Ministry of Education for many decades as a curriculum developer and as an educator. So she's run the gamut from music teacher to dance teacher to HOD, etc. Right? So she has been contributing in a major way, especially with respect to the CSEC and tweaking the program to suit students' responses and so on, the curriculum, the dance curriculum in particular. She has also served as examiner and table leader for the Theatre Arts CSEC examination, and that was since from inception to 2013. Alison is also a professional dance training, but she has done dance training, I should say. And she's done her professional training at the Boston Conservatory of Music, the School of Toronto Dance Theatre, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Center, and the Danza Contemporanea de Cuba. So Alison comes with a lot of information, expertise to add to this chat today. And of course, she played the role of the apparition in the version of Dream on Monkey Mountain that we will see clips of today. So Alison, welcome, and thanks for being with us and coming to share.
Thank you. And we move on to Sonia Dumas. Sonia Dumas is a multi-hyphenate arts practitioner, educator, and theorist, concentrating on Caribbean culture. She's a founder and co-director of Coco Dance Festival, the largest contemporary dance festival in the English-speaking Caribbean, as well as the founder and artistic director of her own dance company, Continuum Dance Project. An award-winning filmmaker, Sonja has written, directed, and produced several films that speak to the Caribbean experience, including Julia and Joyce, two stories of two dance pioneers, Tickle Me Rich, Avocado and Zaboka, and a food preparation show called Sonja Doesn't Cook. Most recently, she founded Zoom Zoom Museum, an interactive children's museum highlighting various aspects of Caribbean heritage. She is also currently serving as the vice chairperson of the Little Carib Theatre in Trinidad and Tobago. Sonja is an honors graduate of Princeton University and also holds a Master of Business Administration and Marketing from Columbia University, etc., etc. Thank you very much, Sonja, for being with us. Welcome.
Etc., etc., etc. Okay, and we're continuing. We want to also welcome Wendell Manwaring and thank him for giving us the time. And most of us and our audience will recognize the name Wendell Manwaring attached to Tricanal, the famous Rapso group, right? They've done some fantastic work, you know, and we Trinidadians and Tobagonians are very proud of your work and what Tricanal has been doing, you know. So I just wanted to share with you a little background on Wendell. So Wendell Roger Manwaring is a singer, writer, actor, producer, teacher, sound designer, and director. And he has been involved in the theater and performing arts for the past 35 years. Mr. Manwaring has had the opportunity to work and learn from the very best of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, you know, especially when you're working with people like Derek Walcott. I mean, that Errol Jones, you know, I'm looking at this play and thinking, gosh, you all are so fortunate, you know. So having cut his teeth, so to speak, as a member of the now defunct Trinidad Tent Theatre in 1985, under the direction of Helen Camps, Wendell has since gone to work closely with such luminaries as Peter Minshall and the Callaloo Company, Derek Walcott, and the Trinidad Theatre Workshop, as we know, Nicole Douglas and the Lilliput Theatre, to name a few. As a founding member and performer and producer with the cutting edge Rapso crew, Tricanal, yes, Wendell continues to challenge his growth and development as a contemporary Caribbean artist in the world today, and you're doing a fantastic job. Let me just say welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Yes, and now that brings me to our St. Lucian contributors, and we're thinking of first Mr. Alvin Hippolyte, whom I have known forever, and Mr. Alvin Hippolyte has been a theatrical practitioner for over 40 years. He has directed several showcases off-Broadway and off-Broadway. He has been an artist in residence at Howard University, Virginia Commonwealth University, taught and directed theater at Medgar Evers College, Kingsborough Community College, and Queensborough Community College. Alvin has acted as the esteemed Folger Shakespeare Theatre in Washington, D.C., the Henry Settlement in New York, and the Jean Coutu Repertory in New York. He's a member of the Brave New World Theatre Company of Brooklyn. Alvin directed for Colored Girls, in 2010, and Antigone in 2015 in St. Lucia, and also acted in Dream on Monkey Mountain in 1981, which was St. Lucia's contingent, or part of the contingent to Carrie Festa 81. Really, really pleased and honored to welcome Mr. Alvin Hippolyte to share with us his experience in Dream on Monkey Mountain. And then last but not least, also my fellow man, other fellow man, and I think I can speak about this man's work with just off the top of my head. I don't need a written biography to speak about Kendall, because Kendall is a stalwart. He's a worker, cultural worker that I think generations of St. Lucians, myself and younger than me, have looked up to, and in some one way or another, he has assisted us our own development. And I mean, I know that Kendall studied in Jamaica in the 70s, studied the arts. I know that he also did postgrad work with Caville in theater, focusing on St. Lucian theater, the St. Lucia Arts Guild, etc. I know that Kendall founded, along with his wife and some other persons, the Lighthouse Theater, which for many years was the theater in St. Lucia, where many people young people got exposed to theater, and that he taught theater at the Southwest Community College. Before that, he taught at the St. Mary's College. He has directed many plays, several plays, including plays by Roger Walcott, Miles Feeney, which I co-directed with him, and went to, we took to Jamaica. He is an award-winning poet and director. He's won the Bocas Prize for Poetry. He lectures frequently throughout the region and invited various parts of the world. And he's published at least 7 books, collections of poetry, I think, and written several plays. His poetry is studied at CXC Cape, and his play Drum Maker has also been on the list for CXC for several years. And so Kendall and that team we have here is suitably qualified to help us analyze and come to a decision as to whether we are correct. It's Dream on Monkey Mountain, a theater classic, a Caribbean theater classic. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for being here. And the way we're going to proceed will be simple. Fortunately, we were able to get a recording of a performance of Dream on Monkey Mountain that was done at Huntington Theater. Hope I got that pronunciation correctly, at Boston. And that was in 1994. So you know that would have been a celebratory performance, because that would have been just after Derek won the Nobel Prize. So we have that performance, and we are going to play clippings of that performance and use these clippings as stimuli for our discussion and responses from our practitioners, many of whom who are in the play. And we will also engage our audience as well and discuss some of the issues. So Keon Reed, who is a very skilled, hardworking technician at the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, will be assisting us to play those clippings. And so the idea is that we play a clipping and then we engage our panelists and we go right through that way. Okay. So Keon, can we have our first clipping? And while we wait for Keon and the clipping, right behind me, this is actually a photograph taken by a gentleman called Christopher Cox of the La Soucier Mountain in St. Lucia. If you look behind the green there, you can see how you may also see some mist that's in clouds. Now, when it rains, you can actually see the mist hanging over La Soucier. And La Soucier is also, if you think of the sorceress, and there's a lot of myth always associated with La Soucier. La Soucier is that mountain where the liberated Africans positioned themselves. They surrounded and lived around La Soucier, where Derek did a lot of research in the early days with Harold Simmons. All right, I think we can go to the clipping now. And this is the opening of the play. Please have a good look.
Your son in the jail already. Take a towel and bang your belly. Muma, muma. Your son in the jail already. Your son in the jail already. Take a towel and bang your belly. Again, mama. Your son in the jail already. I passed by the police station. Nobody to sign the bail bond. Muma, muma. Your son in the jail already. I passed by the police station.
Yes, remarkable, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Keon. You know, Dr. LaChapelle, this opening here, this dance, this choreography, you know, when I look at this, what comes to mind, I'm thinking of form as well as dance. And form in the sense of how the play begins. This is how the play begins. It begins with this choreographed piece. And, you know, I'm thinking at the time that this play was first performed, during that period, you know, where there was a heavy emphasis on realism, you know, on the type of drama that took place in a yard or sitting room, etc. But here we have something that is different. Here we have a play where several folk forms, it seems, are combined to create a piece. I want you to assist me with the effectiveness of this and perhaps the process of putting this together, that beginning there.
Okay, wonderful to see that all of the resurrections of dream, but that one in particular, because I was looking at me actually dancing. Did you notice me dancing? You did not notice me. Right. I'm very pleased to see that the body doesn't do those things anymore. All right, so today I revisit the excitement of choreographing an original piece that utilized our Caribbean culture within mainstream theater. Derek Walcott's dream offered possibilities for the dance as a syncretic fusion of styles in a work that draws strength from folk roots and revivifies existing traditions, yet is distinct and articulates a different reality. So it's an opening number. It's meant to excite. It's meant to draw the audiences. I could go on and on, but there's so much that we need to talk about this evening. Enough said, you know. Let me quote J. Alexis, 1996, who stated, for the Caribbean artist, it is not a question of merely bearing witness. It's a question of aiding the coming of that which is coming to birth. This he said at the first Negro Congress in 1896. In the dance, spirit is the animating principle that, like most post-colonial art in the Caribbean, offers the will to power to write ourselves into being on our own terms as subjects rather than as objects.
Spirit, very interesting. I like that. Can you just speak, you know, on the figures? There are some figures there that I'm seeing in the dance that are very interesting, that almost seem iconic. So when you talk about spirit, some of those figures, can you name some of them perhaps that exist in Trinidadian society that you brought into?
Better call Albert. Every culture has a grammar of motifs. And we have people like Basil. You see, talking about it afterwards, it's good, but the audience can't see those figures if I now talk about them. So yes, it's a mix, but it is an opening number. It is a number that introduces what's to happen. And if you can, apart from the energy that comes out of the dance, you can also see that some characters are introduced. There's Alison being the woman in white that is significant in Mustique's life later on in the play, you know, the white with two. There is the understanding, as I said, a mixture of styles. Here, the opening, we have the use of props that are not usual in folk dance. unless it's specific to that particular dance. So I really juxtaposed folk and creative modern, experimenting and expanding the style to use traditional concepts to produce fresh and exciting combinations. There's a wonderful energy and force that erupts when music and movement are intermingled in production that utilized trained and untrained dancers, because Derek, as most directors I've met, like dance, but they like to think that the actors could dance too. Alison, are you there?
All right, thank you. We are going to play a couple of clippings of that. So, we will move on to another one, and then we can bring in Alison as well as Sonia to assist us to understand what was happening there with the dance pieces and how they helped to create that amazing theatricality that we see.
Interpret my choreography, are you?
All right, Keon, can we go to the next one, please?
You, brother. God bless you, stranger. Come, pray with us.
Give us this day our daily bread. And it's that self I come to talk to you about, friend. Whether you could spare a little bread.
Where you come from, stranger?
From Monkey Mountain in Forestier Quarter. It's me and my friend, an old man. We were sleeping in the hut by the side of the road when we see you all coming. And with all them lights, I think we thought it was the devil.
It ain't have much to eat here, stranger. We taking the sick man down to the hospital, and it have just enough for all of us here to eat.
Anything, brother. It's 3 days now we're on the road. What is wrong with him, stranger?
A snake. Josephus was working in the bush and a snake, and no medicine can cure him.
So what they doing with him now?
They're making a small fire with coals to make him sweat, to break the heat in his body so he could sweat. So they're building a small fire to break the sweat with coals.
Coals?
Charcoal, you don't know charcoal?
Charcoal is my business, stranger.
They bring priest, they bring doctor, still they have no hope. He have a bad fever and cannot sweat.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I think I see Sonia and Alison in this piece, and I want to invite them to comment. Is this going on to the Caribbean? I'm hearing Negro spirituals, and I want to ask Alison and Sonia to just give us an insight into what was the experience like then at that time, bringing in a Negro spiritual, a dance to a Negro spiritual within that Caribbean space. And how was that effective in terms of the theatricality and perhaps even the meaning and form of the play as well? Sonja, would you like to comment, please?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Travis, I really appreciate it. And I must say, I'm sorry, I came from another very long panel discussion. So here I am. I wasn't able to come, as you know, before this time. But what I would say is that I actually never thought of it as a separate entity, this sort of concept of the Negro spiritual. There are a few reasons for that. Number one, We have in our space the folk theater competition called Best Village, and they tend to use the motif of the Negro spiritual, as you call it, within a lot of their dances. So it was familiar terrain for most of us who have had a Best Village experience. And the other thing is that I think in terms of remember, dance within a musical is supposed to drive the story and support the story in some way. At that time, it was a death scene. It sort of lent itself to the plaintive moment, to the moment of grief, which again speaks to the Negro spiritual's essence, which is one that is based in grief as to one's lot. So that I think that that's where that connection came for me. In terms of the dance, I haven't seen this performance. I was looking at it and I'm like, oh my God, I remember those costumes. Oh my Lord, what a thing. And I am reminded that the costume is an extension of the movement for a lot of us in the Caribbean. So that it becomes a sort of co-collaborator with the movement, and those costumes tended to extend because of the strips of fabric, etc., that twirled around us as we twirled and twirled around the body. It tends to be a sort of extension of the intent of the choreography and how the dancer moves in the costume and helps the whole scene happen. So those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, it's not separate in the sense of being, aside from the theme, because if we're talking about the condition of the Blacks in the New World, then I think that is shared by those in North America as in the Caribbean, and the forms will reflect that, whether they're the Negro spirituals from North America or our own cultural forms and our dances. So I was wondering whether, Derek Walker was going for a kind of expansive, range, if you like, that would take in all of both of those worlds. And perhaps too, I don't know, perhaps maybe Albert can speak about it, or Alison, or anyone else, whether
I would say it's hybridity. I would say it's hybridity. Yeah, I would say it's hybridity. Derek is known for his hybridity in terms of, he combines St. Lucian Creole with Greek theater and chorus, etc. So there's a hybridity to it that I think is very much Derek, or was very much Derek, in terms of how he saw his kind of worldview about what his works would do, marrying these elements that are seemingly disparate, but then come together to make a statement that is holistic. So sorry for cutting you. I just needed to say that because I felt that was important.
Thank you very much. I think that is an excellent point. But we still have two dance pieces, so that's fine. We're discussing the dance first because I think it's really important to the whole theatricality, and so we'll go on to another clipping, and I really want to hear from Alison. I haven't heard from Alison yet as well. So can you please, Keon, let us have the other clipping?
I like a nigger with spirit.
They say he's on a long walk through every village on his way to the sea, looking towards Africa. And when he gets there, God will tell him what to do. It's called up yonder. When the roll is called up yonder.
Now he's coming.
When the roll is called up
like
yonder.
I have never seen a burger so full. This place is a good business. And the music too. A cripple. It's the crippled who believe in miracles. It's the slaves who believe in freedom. I will show all you how it happened. Marcus, say rise up.
make way. Make way. The Abyssinian lion leap again. Leap again. For macaque walk in frenzy down Monkey Mountain, and God send this message in lightning handwriting, that the sword of sunlight be in his right hand, and the moon his shield. Amen. You there, macaque. Which man dare call macaque by name? Which man dare call the lion by his name?
The corporal of police.
I laugh. I laugh. A corporal of police. Well, macaque have come to Kashmir market this morning, and neither corporal nor spiritual stopping him.
All right, thank you. Great. You know, one thing that really interests me about this play is the way in which it's interesting, because, you know, we'll go into discussion of theme in a while. But, you know, the whole thing about the racial tension, etc., and the dominance of the voice of the colonial through Lestrade. However, how this is counterpointed by some very strong Black Creole, Afro Creole, if you like, dances, you know, that dominates the stage, and that is a very powerful counteraction against the colonial discourse. Is something that I really find fascinating about this play. I wonder if somebody could tell me something about this dance that we just saw, the figure. I'm curious as to where it's coming from in Trinidad. Is it the Shangu? Is it Risha? Is it Bele? Perhaps Alison or Carol?
Well, I'd like to give Alison a chance to speak. Yeah, Alison? I'm not.
Oh, your mic is muted, Alison.
Right. Oh, so sorry about that. But if I may, I would just like first to go back to the scene with the sick man. And I want to mention that in looking at this after 24 years, I recall that was, for me, the most difficult scene to do, because it's, apart from the pathos of the song and what it meant, it lent itself to a lot of improvisation. We were given a framework from Carol, there was a structure, but the movement that came from each dancer was improvised. It was from a sense of, what am I feeling at this time? And it was the kind of scenario that could fall very flat or could be very powerful. So it was, for me, a conscious effort to really get into the meat of the movement, into the meat of the mood, and what the words were suggesting to my spirit. So I just wanted to mention that about the last scene. But now talking about the scene we just saw, Carol and, well, most of the dancers came from a training that was classical, but then blended with our traditional forms, so that the scene that we saw in the market there allowed the choreographer to bring in some of our traditional movements to represent what that scene was speaking about. So you would have seen movements that would be considered African or from the Caribbean. And so it was a melding, a blending of ideas, of movements. And that is something that it carries through in most of the choreography in this production.
I could add,
please go ahead.
I could add that the quality of the movement is dictated by the ritual. We know that one element of dance and in dance performance and presentation is improvisation. When it comes to folk, that is quite essential and happens quite often. So I thought it was right for that production, building on what Alison shared. And it's a kind of raw power that is included, injected into the performance, which adds excitement with vigorous, sensuous, earthy, ritualistic moves and intricately linked to music The style is African in character, yes, Allison. And the choreography aimed to invoke a sense of credibility, of realness. The artist takes the spirit of the old and transfers it to the new.
I just want to add that. I just want to add that in your in answer to your original question, Travis, it's a piqué. It comes from the tradition of the piqué, which is from it's a creolized word from piquant, spicy, hot, and it's usually that particular move where the women try to get the attention of the man. There is that sort of, and using the skirt as their kind of conduit towards the man and to show off other women. That is quite ingrained in one of the dances that forms the suite of what we call the ballet in Trinidad. And piqué is that dance. So I think that if anyone were to see, any Trinidadian were to look at that dance, I think that's the word that would come up for them initially. And of course, as Carol says, there's this, the amalgamation of impulses of Africa to bring place and space to the whole thing. There's also that issue of empowerment, because at that time, the man is king. Remember, he's the same one who ends up dead, but at that time, he's the man kind of thing, right? And the piqué has that sense of bringing a kind of power to the people who are dancing it.
Thank you very much. And just very quickly, I just want to say as well that I find it very interesting what the whole idea of ritual, structure, improv that Dr. LaChapelle and Alison were also adding. Because what is interesting for me in terms of the exploration of dance and theater is when you have the ritual, and you have dancers / actors, performers within that ritual improvising, things happen. The concept of memory that is sometimes eludes us, it comes into play here, cultural memory, where things happen to the body during the improvisation that is very well connected to the ritual within the culture, the memory of the culture. And so there is a kind of a governing spirit, a risky word to use, I know, but I think LaChapelle used it earlier, spirit, that also adds to the quality of the performance as well. So very, very, very interesting what all three of you are saying. All right, we have one final piece of dance that I would like Keon to play at this point. Please, Keon, thanks. And the dance in Jimon Monkey Mountain and the figures, the costumes, is such an important part of the play. I think sometimes we overlook, when we think of drama, we overlook the importance of movement, dance, to style and mood, and to reinforcing theme coherently. Sometimes overlook that, and so it's really important what we're doing in terms of focusing on these dance pieces. So I really thank you all for your elucidation.
All right, do we have this last?
Oh, great.
I'm gonna have to come back to it, so just give me a few minutes and I'm sorting out something here in the background.
All right.
I perhaps just add that the ritual is used to evoke spirits, and spirit is linked to empowerment and healing. So using the Shango, or elements of the Shango in that sick man scene, as we called it, it was appropriate in the healing scene. Possession is induced by dancing and drumming, which expands the boundaries of time and space, what Schechner famously called restored behaviors, So using the appropriate types of dance was important, and it worked.
Thank you. Excellent. I think what was happening, I think Derek Walcott was creolizing the stage. We're talking here about when work that started in 50s, 60s, etc. In terms of him, of course, I think Mark Burney started long before that. But I think that type of work in terms of awakening those forms, like you say, through the spirit and bringing them onto the stage at a time when we were trained in Europe, saying we in terms of the Caribbean, where we were looking to European forms and styles and so on. I think that the careful scripting and bringing in the kind of expertise and dancer skill, you know, to work those Creole forms was so important in terms of creating an aesthetic, a new aesthetic for the Caribbean, for Caribbean theater.
And I don't think, you know, Travis, correct me, because I'm thinking when we, the dancers, choreographer, walked in, joined, became theater workshop and became a family, I think we may have inspired Walcott, encouraged him to add a lot more dance to his productions, his writing, his theater pieces, you know, because after that, well, we went from Dream to Joker to Babylon to, you know, it continued.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe later Kendall can add something to this as a playwright. And I'm a playwright myself, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a process that is collective. Absolutely. Keon, you ready with this clip?
This picture now, y'all, that is John Isaacs.
Isaac shall not pass this way again.
Oh.
His feet calling him to the shores of Africa.
Young John.
And he tired.
Wendell.
And he thirsty with the dust of 30 roads in his throat. Ah, daughter of heaven, Macaque will remember you. But I prefer cash as a traveling hard. Zambezi, Congo, Niger, Limpopo. Is your brown milk I drink. Is your taste I remember. Is the root of your trees that is in the veins in my hand. Is your flowers now falling from my lips. By belief, I make blessing. But even the black sheep of God cannot go hungry. They must be fed. So children of darkness, bring whatever you have. Make harvest. Make sacrifice. Bring whatsoever you have. A yam, a shilling. Put it on the mouth of God. That Macaque is the tongue. And when all is put into one bag, we shall pray. You shall fast, and I will pray. Now, kneel and listen to the revelation of my experience. Well, they say I can cure. Well, I cannot cure except you believe I can cure. Except you want to be cured. Thank you, brother. Put it there. 7 days and 7 nights. Me and a great friend called Moustique, who fell sick by the wayside. 6 days and 6 nights. We leave monkey traveling over hot pasture and dry river, like 2 leaves blowing in the hot wind. You will ask, how the divine sadness can fall on such men? A poor charcoal burner who couldn't see light. MPM. Inspector of milk and corporal of the law. 1 billion trillion years of pressure is bringing light. And it's for that I say Africa will break light. Now, Macaque must go where his feet call him. But first, he will sprinkle you with this water, for the cure is in yourselves. La la di di, la la di do di do do, la la da do, la da di do, la da di do di da do, lo lo la do, lo la. Next, Macaque will drink. A spider! A spider was on my hand. Look, I hate those things.
A spider? A man who will bring you deliverance is afraid of a spider?
I'm not afraid of that. It just makes me jump.
Then show us. You, Basil, the carpenter, come. Take it and bring it to the warrior macaque. Take it.
Thanks. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. The late Stanley Marshall, amazing performer there with Manwaran. I'm thinking another aspect of Dream on Monkey Mountain that also fascinates me was that at that time, you know, Walcott was going for a poetic drama. So there's a lot of symbolism there as well. And you know, thinking of the whole idea of the spider and coal, and I see Stanley with a mask hanging at his side, etc. And the symbolism of that little ritual there, and the undertones are kind of there's a kind of a hymn going there, kind of a, is it Catholic, perhaps Catholic hymn going there. But all that certainly speaks, we see, to the whole theme, the most important theme of that play, and that is the theme of identity. So I wonder, we don't, unfortunately, may rest in peace, have Marshall with us, but we certainly have Wendell Manwaran. And Wendell, I wonder if you want to come in now and just speak to us about this scene there and what it meant for you at that time.
I was just watching all these clips. It's with an incredible sense of nostalgia and seeing so many people. Just see Charles turn around there as Basil, and then as Carol said, John Isaacs, and of course Stanley and Errol. What it meant for me at that time, I think I was in a dream. I literally was in a dream. I got an opportunity to work with the best, the biggest, you know, names in acting, and to work with the theatre workshop, to work with Derek and Carol and Albert, and I was a young fella, you know, now coming into my own as an actor, feeling a sense of what I was capable of, and Derek gave me, you know, that endorsement, and the theatre workshop afforded me that opportunity to sink my teeth into, you know, a very meaty role. And in that scene there, it's all about Stan Lee at his comedic best, and talk about timing and, you know, that whole market scene, you know, back to the elements of style, creating a world. And for me as an actor, that just makes my job so much easier. I could just immerse myself in this world that has been created by the director and the choreographer and the use of the music and all those sort of things, and just say my lines and act and react, you know. And literally in those days, it was as simple as that for me. I didn't overthink the process at all. I didn't try to put any kind of meaning to what was given to me, except to understand it and to bring it alive to the best of my ability. I was just reading, you know, in what the Twilight says earlier on today, Walker says, an actor first approaches the role with his nerves and then with his brain. And I certainly think that this was the instance, what was happening for me there. I was just acting in a visceral way. Now I could look at it 20-something years later and say, oh God, unclench your jaw a little bit or whatnot. But, you know, Lestrade's a bad man. You know, Lestrade, I just played to type. I just was playing him to the hilt. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity to have learned from such an intricate piece of work and to work with, you know, these giants and to learn from them.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. At this point, you know, I think we need to go now into the heart of the matter, the story and the beginnings and so on. You know, it is, some people regard Dream as a complex play, and I like what you're saying, but for me, the theatricality of it and the acting and the power of it, you know, is what pushes it through very, very significantly. And the poetry and the symbolism, you could get it subconsciously, you don't have to get it consciously, but it certainly makes an impression on you. But Albert Laveau, the man himself, I think would have been part of the beginnings of the whole process of Dream coming into being. And I'd like to hear from Mr. Laveau. Can you tell us, Mr. Laveau, Albert, about how you first got started into Dream? Let's begin with that story. And then get to Macaque's story. You're muted, Albert. You're muted.
Okay, I got you. You got me
Yes.
now? Right. Okay.
We have you.
Yeah. His main thrust in a lot of his work, or most of his work, is to try to find a style that is appropriate to this region. And everything that we did, if you looked at this play and you asked, somebody asked, what is that play about? Well, if you said that it's about a search for one's identity, you wouldn't be too far over the mark, you see? And Derek was trying to use, or had been trying throughout all his life, to find a voice through which we can speak for ourselves in this region, in the Caribbean. And as Carol and Alison were talking about the dances, I think it is sad somewhere, says that first we have to find yourselves inside you. And next, to give expression to what you find. Those songs that are used there, they come out of the spirit, out of the soul of the formerly enslaved people. The statements that are made about abandoning whiteness and so on is part of the process of trying to find oneself.
Yeah.
And so the songs, there's also the shango, which is used in times of wakes and trouble and things like that. We dug in ourselves and found those songs that are applicable to this situation that Macaque finds himself in. Am I going to find myself by going back to Africa? You know, am I going to find it by, changing the color of my skin, things like that? All of these questions came up and have come up over the years about Dream on Monkey Mountain. The dream is simply an imaginary journey that a man takes to find himself. And you will see in the end of the play, he found himself right where he was.
Yes.
Up here, up there on a hill with a signal of smoke. That the people will see that's where Macaque lives, where Macaque has always lived, in the dream of his people. I don't know if that answers anything.
Yeah, absolutely, Albert. But I want to go through a little about the process of the actual staging of the play. The first play was first performed, was it in 1967 in Toronto, right?
Well, the first time we saw the play at all was in the basement. And we had a reading. And I think Errol pronounced it a little bit too verbose. And Derek was not amused. They should give him a damn play. And he went, several months later, I think the year I'm talking about now is probably about 65, when we're in the basement. And we had to take the play production to Canada to celebrate, to assist our friend Johnny Cayon, who was starting this Caribana Festival thing, on behalf of the West Indian migrants. And we decided, Derek had done some considerable rewriting, or more writing, and he came back and we staged it at Queen's Hall. At first, I think in 1967. Yes. Well, Well, in 1967, it was staged at the world premiere at the Caribana Festival at the Central Library in Toronto. In that production, we had people like Slade Hopkinson, and we had several of people who are past now. You see some of them in the play there, like Stanley Marshall, Earl Jones, Claude Reed, John Isaacs. Then these people are not with us anymore. This was the company that Derek wanted to. When we staged in Port of Spain, we got all kinds of reactions from all kinds of viewers. They criticized even the actors. They liked the women. They thought that they could sing, they could dance, but they can't sing, and some about who could sing. But what Walcott was doing was trying to make a company that could do everything. And the company that he called it an ensemble. He said there are no stars in this group. Everybody did everything, even building set, building costume if you could, and things like that. And I was excluded or was not on the trip because there was no, I was in 2 other plays. So he didn't want this stardom thing to get rooted about that. I am the lead and everything. No, you know. So he said, "Oh, it looks like I'm going to Canada." I said, "Well, if that's how it is, that's how it is." He said, "No, man, but yeah, I'm just saying that the team that we have here now, you're not in it." So well, that's it. So he said, "No," and then he took this part, Basil, and developed it. Basil is the death figure. When they ask, "Who is that man, that tall man in the tall hat?" you say, "That is Basil, the carpenter and the coffin maker." So that was me. And I had a lot more lines, and we use them as controlling in some kind of a magical way, the corporal's conversion, you know. So
right,
that was the first. And then in August, we went to Guyana. When we came back from Canada, one night, we packed up the next morning and went down to Guyana because we were booked down there, you know. Yes, you were going to say?
Yeah, and what is the response? What is the audience response in Canada and Guyana?
Oh, it was overwhelmingly congratulatory and all that. Nobody had seen anything like this before, you know? And I mean, if you look down the whole list of performances that we've had, everybody across the Caribbean wanted to see this play, and one day we were not supposed to go to Antigua, but the company went to do a Belfanto and something else, and I was waiting in Barbados to meet them to go back down to Grenada, and I got a phone call as soon as they arrived in Antigua. Errol Jones said, "Antigua wants to see this play. They want to see it, but Slade Hopkinson is not available for us, you know." So they say, "Well, could you come up?" And they don't care if you have a book like that, you know. So I said no. But so that was part of the story of how people were anxious.
Thanks a million, Albert. Yeah, that sounds like quite a beginning, quite a journey. You know, we have Mr. Alvin Hippolyte with us, who's been doing a lot of work outside of the Caribbean, but who's kept in touch with the Caribbean, former director of culture in St. Lucia, and was the lead actor. He played Macaque when the play went to Carifesta 81 in Barbados. And so, Alvin, we're going to play a clip next. I think Macaque is in that clip, performed by Errol Jones. And I would like you to speak to this after we play the clip. Keon, can we have that clip, please?
Where is your
with
home,
Macaque?
Africa? Summon Macaque. English! English! For we are observing the principles and precepts of Roman law, and Roman law is English law. Let me repeat the query. Where is your home? I lives on Monkey Mountain. What is your name? I forget. What is your race? I tired. What is your denominational affiliation?
Saki religion.
Catholic. I ask you with all the patience of the law, what is or has been your denominational affiliation? Catholic. You forget your name. Your race is tired. Your denominational affiliation is Catholic.
Yeah, this is hilarious. This is beautiful. Alvin Hippolyte, Mr. Alvin Hippolyte. Yeah, two things I want to ask you in relation to that scene and your role, etc. Is one, just simply when you were entering that character, when you played Macaque for the first time, studying that part and playing it. I mean, what was happening to you? What were you thinking? What was going through you? First question, yeah. And well, let's do that first question. Process.
Well, I was thinking, yeah, there's something they say here that after you've seen Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire, nobody should do that character anymore. And that's how I always feel when you see Errol do that part in Macaque, and you wonder, really? And I still feel after seeing Errol do that, nobody should attempt that, because Errol embodied that seriously. But that play to me was always so fascinating. And there's something Derek in one of his poems or something, he says, it's like we are a grand people, we are people of style. And to me, when you look at that play, I don't know anybody who had written anything like that. That play is grand, and it gives you an opportunity, to act, and all these characters, if you look at Lestrade, if you're an actor and you get to do any one of these parts, and growing up, I wanted to do Lestrade, and then I would turn around and want to do Macaque, and then you turn around and want to do something. They're so grand, and so when I was director of culture, and we said, okay, we have to take something to Carifesta, and I almost committed another sin again. I decided I was going to direct and play Macaque. And then after about a couple of readings, and I said, there's no way I can do that. You cannot play Macaque and direct that play. That it's just too big. And I asked your father too. I said, hey, I think you better take over directing that play, because, I'm just going to blow that whole thing away by doing a bad job.
You're referring to Alan Weeks.
Alan, yeah, your father, yeah. Took over directing the play, and I think that was a great decision to make. But you look at that play, and that play, if you see the things happening in St. Lucia in the US now on TV, you see a lot of things, and you can see, well, you can trace it back. There are things like Lackawanna Blues, the kind of shows they do on TV now with a kind of mystic presence and you have, you know, kind of creolization of it. They mix it in, you know, it's like a bouillon. It's like a Caribbean piece, and there's a lot of that happening now. And to me, Derek's pieces, I mean, way ahead of all of that, you know. And I wanted to say something on the dance. If you look at, when I came here to study theater, it's not so much about me, but the people in the theater classes, especially at Howard, they were always fascinated in how we could move, you know, how we could move or on the stage and just walk on. Or because again, people like Derek, we always had to move, and in the Caribbean, we always move, you know. So there's no kind of separation between the movement and the dialogue. So we just you know, we just do that, just comes to us. And they always wanted to know, well, how you all do that? I mean, I say, if you look at the stuff we do, we sing, we dance, you know, and it just comes natural to us, you know. So a play like Derek, in that play, you have, if you're a performer, you have everything in there, everything in there. And when Carol was talking about part of the dances was improvised, there's all the whole sense. Now you look at the dance and you don't, it's not improvisation where you see everybody doing their own thing. There are people doing their own thing, but there's a kind of unity of purpose and a kind of spirit within that makes it a whole thing. So, you know, you don't see it, well, you think everybody, you know, that thing was choreographed that way, but, you know, it's the whole idea of getting the sense, getting the spirit within that context that makes it seem to come together as a whole. Right.
But in terms of the mission of the play, if you like, the message of the play, you know, I mean, Macaque, you know, of course, Derek writes a script, so there's humor and so on, but Macaque is a degraded man. And at the beginning, certainly he is. And it's interesting, if you look at these scenes there with Macaque and Moustique and so on, you know, it could be the degraded blacks in any Caribbean city. And certainly it seemed to me that, because I read somewhere Derek says Macaque come from my childhood, this chuckle burner coming from the country and coming down and roaring, you know, in the city. But exploring our history and the effects of colonization, the issues of identity, the discomfort that has caused a tremendous amount of degradation for Caribbean blacks is explored through Macaque. And of course he is restored, and perhaps we'll get to that. But how Derek as well was influenced by intellectual movements and intellectual traditions and major intellectuals of the time is also interesting, like Garvey, like Fanon, etc., were tremendously influenced. So,
well, there's also Garvey there. Garvey is making that trip back. You know, Garvey had that whole trip of going back to Africa.
Right.
So there are tones of that in there. But to me, what's interesting about Macaque is that Macaque is a degraded, but he's taking journey. He is that self, but he's also looking for the other self, you know, and reverting back to that self, like we said previously, like he was always there. It was a question of, you know, to me, being degraded was an external force, but within him, to me, that self was always there. So he was looking from reacting to external forces. And
Right.
once he goes back, you know, he finds and say, hey, this is me, I am here. And then
I totally agree.
He got comfortable in his skin.
I totally agree, because I think that degradation was a projection onto him, not that it was one that he embraced. And I don't know if it's because I was playing opposite Errol, but Errol's Macaque never struck me as a degraded character. And I think in a sense
that's why I said that it was external.
Yeah,
it was put upon him.
And that's why I'm agreeing with you. And that's why I use that as fuel for Lestrade, because Lestrade was really irked by his sort of presence. He had a kind of regality to him, you know, in those interactions with Macaque. Lestrade had nothing but utter contempt for him. And that was his trauma and his condition as well.
But I want to qualify when I say the gradient. I'm talking about, that's why I say the mission and the journey, because I think that, certainly by the end of the play and through the whole process of coming to himself, into self-acceptance, I mean, we don't see that degradation. By the time, you know, he reclaims his stature, we don't see that disappears. But it seems to me that's part of the mission of the play. But I want to get to another clip that will also help us focus a little more, stimulate that type of discussion in terms of the intellectual movement, in terms of Fanon, and the whole racial tension, or if not racial, but perhaps cultural tension, that the rage for whiteness that Lestrade talks about.
Niggas mad.
Can we go to the other clip?
Things that stick in Walcott. Sorry.
I think Carol is going to share a little bit from Fanon for us, and then we'll. And we want to
Fanon Power, trying to remember what to learn in my masters. You're kidding, aren't you?
Right. Mr. Kendall Ippolit came into his own in the 70s, 80s as well, at a time when a lot of these polemics were dominant. Yeah. So yes, Keon, thank you for the next step.
Reach this spot. I see this woman singing. My feet grow roots. I could move no more. A million silver needles prickle my blood like a rain of small fishes. The snakes in my head talk to one another. The smoke mouth open, and I behold this woman, the loveliest thing I ever see on this earth, floating towards me like the moon. Like the moon was walking along her own road. Look at her. You don't see her, I see her. Like the moon had climbed down the steps of heaven and was standing in front of me. I can see nothing. What do you see?
Nothing. Nothing.
Nothing. There she is.
I see nothing. The old man mad.
Wait. I see it. I see it. It's the face of the moon moving across the floor. Hey, come to me, darling.
My lords, is this rage for whiteness that does drive niggers mad? Reach this spot.
Yes, thank you very much. Right, I think Wendell, that's your line. That's your line. This rage for whiteness is driving niggas mad. Would you like to comment on that?
Lestrade had some incredible lines. If he hadn't, as I said, his contempt was bare, you know, and it was really to be able to say those lines, you know, to get over myself to be able to say those lines. You know, that whole monologue he gives about the apes and whatnot right at the beginning. He gave really incredibly offensive lines, and said with all his heart and soul and intent, because it's what he believes. It's what he believes. And it's probably what he has seen. It's probably why he is, you know, the man that he is. You know, it's the story of our history in his mind, you know. And as I say, in that moment, he's fully committed to that belief. And we see it played out in Macaque's madness with this vision of this white woman, i.e. the moon, that appears to him.
You know, looking back at this, having done it 24 years ago, I was thinking about what were my thoughts when I had to play that part. And I didn't, that line is this rage for whiteness that is drive niggas mad, stayed with me, and it resonated with me. And as I played the part, what moved me was, well, first the direction given by the director, the words uttered from Macaque, and also the drum in the background, as well as the flute playing ever so softly in the background. And this mystic presence, as was mentioned just now, that this being that seemed far from him, but she was urging him back to Africa. Those memories just came back. And I'm looking at it, because I looked at it about twice since being asked in preparation for this event. there were so many more messages coming to me that years of experience and life would have you see things with different eyes now. So this woman and him gaining a sense of self-realization and self-actualization at the end when he chops off her head. And as Wendell mentioned, he never did lose his sense of majesty or dignity. It was always, although he was a charcoal, man from the hills, and he had this dream and he was drunk and etc. But there was always this dignity about Macaque. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once it's there, it can't really go away. So thinking of him degraded, like who said it's external? Is it Alvin or yeah? I think yeah. It's not certainly not from inside. But I want to begin to touch on context, on the political and social context of the 60s and the early 70s. Kenny, I think you were in Jamaica in the early 70s, were you? And yeah, right. What, and this is the time when Dream would have been at its heights. Can you speak perhaps to the issues of Garvey and the Back to Africa movement and how this is handled in the play? What is your take on it? You're muted, sorry. You're muted, Kendall.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I will comment on bringing Garvey on some. I want to backtrack a little bit on time to Derek himself first and then start to put things together a bit, yeah?
Okay. What happened? Don't tell me his call dropped or something, his internet dropped.
I mean, Derek, hear me?
Yeah, you're back in there. Yeah.
Okay. It was a little all right. Yeah. I was saying Derek grew up at a time, when the colonial presence was, really, really, really heavy, and as a well-read, child and then young man and so on, really, really heavily exposed to English literature, to wider than that European literature, and he understood firsthand what it was to feel this pressure of a civilization that labeled itself as superior and tried to turn you into something else. He knew what that meant. Derek knew what it was as a child and a young man to that rage for whiteness. He experienced that. I mean, a lot of his generation did. What grounded him and what counteracted that was his experience actually of the folk culture, first of all, in St. Lucia, that was happening right there on the streets, which he experienced as having as much validity in its own kind of way as the literature, as the cultural experience that was coming via books. And I think from very, very early, he knew that there's a sense in which both are valid. And I mean, there's also a lot to talk about, I try to make creativity out of that, schizophrenia and so on, Earlier on, when the talk of dance was happening, I was remembering something that I heard Rex Nettleford say one time. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how, he was talking almost like off the cuff. He wasn't like making a speech, almost like off the cuff. And he was saying how, you see, in the domain of verbal language, it's easier for the colonizer to come at you, to infiltrate your head and to try to shape you into what it wants to be. Because that's language, that's word, and especially using the language that comes from the colonizer, even though you're eventually going to break it up and make it your own and so on. But that's in the verbal realm. In the area of the body, of dance in particular, I remember Rex was saying they could not penetrate that. The dance gave the enslaved Africans a domain in which they were in charge. They were the kings and queens in that area of the body in motion and rhythm and so on, And I think from very, very early, going back to Derek's experience of masquerade and Papa Jab and so on in St. Lucia. From very, very early, I think he had this vision of trying to create a theater that was poetic, as Albert Laveau referred to that. That was poetic in the sense of using all the verbal resources of poetry and of the English language, and the English language is made up of many different Englishes, but using the verbal poetry, if you like, of language, a theater that was made up of that, but also that was made up of the poetry of movement and music. Yes. He always had that as the ideal theater that he strove for, I think, his whole life, But anyway, so coming back, so that's part of trying to make creative use of the schizophrenia. But coming about the 70s, the 70s was a real time of pressure for everybody, everybody. And for someone like Derek, who from very, very early, held up this ideal of the mestizo, the mulatto, the person who would not give up one world for another or say that this one was better than that one, who felt that there was a way to bring the two together. For him, it was serious pressure because, he can't be white enough, he can't be black enough. No, both sides, I think, both sides in different kinds of ways, vilified him. I know he experienced a lot of trauma, if you like, in Trinidad when the Black Power movement was on, and you have to take a side and that kind of thing. And yes, the work that Garvey had done, which had been up until the 70s, really had been very much like almost like in the counterculture and underground via Rastafari. That work of validating Africa and validating the African presence in you, that had been more underground, I think, up until the late 60s, early 70s. I say it had been then in Rasta and in the Black nationalist movement. But by the time you came into the 70s, when Black Power in the United States really became a clarion call right around the world, and certainly in the Caribbean, figures like Rodney and so on. When Black Power became a clarion call to declare yourself and sink yourself in the roots. Then the pressure of of taking a side, of declaring your blackness, really became really, really intense, and Derek became a victim. Victim is too strong a word, but I think he suffered. He suffered from it. I'm not saying this melodramatically, but he had to take his block. And it's not even that I'm agreeing fully with some of the positions that he took, but he was in the midst of some really, really heavy debates that were going on, not just verbally. There was 1970 in Trinidad, and all the protests on the streets, and everything that flowed out of that. He was in the midst of a lot of currents, of Black nationalism, of finding your roots and so on. And he is trying to find a way in all of this that can feel true to him and right to him. I think from early on, the folk culture of the Caribbean, but it's certainly in St. Lucia first, and then in Trinidad we experience it even more and so on as well too. The folk culture, I think in a way, offered a kind of a standpoint, a bedrock on which he could stand, because his position in a sense was that the peasants, the country people, they've been African, in their own kind of way without shouting about it. They've been African their whole lives without shouting about it. Again, I think that's I don't fully agree with that position, but it's a base that he rested on, and I think someone like Macaque would represent for him that kind of base, someone who at bottom, at depth, always had that dignity. Someone who at bottom, at depth, was never deep down enslaved. Someone who at bottom, at depth, had never ever been colonized in a certain kind of way, but he did not realize it. So there's a kind of a long roundabout way of saying, and I hope I've sort of touched on the Garvey thing a bit. I think in Dream, he's trying to work out all these conflicting positions. Derek is Macaque. Derek is Lestrade also. He's both. He's both, I never found it an easy place, still don't, an easy place to summarize, to arrive at and say, this is what it's saying. I don't, up to now, really.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think I read somewhere that Errol Hill said it was, and I don't agree with him. I think he said something that's been incoherent. But I think certainly one of the traditions that was also working there is that Derek was also heavily influenced by the symbolists. So he's working a lot through symbols in the play. A lot of symbols going through there. And symbols, of course, don't work. They don't articulate the way in which words do. Right. They make impression. They hit you. Right. And so we also have to dissect, if you like, unpack these symbols first to fully comprehend the play. But also, when you spoke about the influence of the folk culture on Derek, it's not just the folk culture of Cassius. Remember, Simmons was taking Derek and Roddy and all of them very early in Spa into the countryside. And when the anthropologists came down, like Lou Max and Crowley, even in Trinidad, that they would co-opt him as a young man to go with them and so on. So he was soaking in and taking in a lot of the stuff, the folk culture, among the liberated Africans that were happening in the Caribbean generally. So was very much influenced by that. But it's interesting what you said about the peasant, and he did make that statement. He wrote that, I think it was in the Views of History, the peasant being the real African, and criticizing, those who want to say wear dashikis and say I'm African. Yeah. I have thought about this. An amazing thing that happens in St. Lucia, I find, is that the peasants, the farmers, and the rural folk, they play African music. They don't talk about being African, but if you things like Waya, Usi, and all these other songs, they played in the parties and they played in the dance. They just play it naturally, because they feel it. And these songs, that kind of music, you wouldn't hear it in other spaces, but you certainly hear it among them. So very, very interesting issues here. Carol wanted to read a little bit from Fanon for us to just underscore some of the issues we're talking about. Carol, can you please go ahead? Yeah. It's Carol Hussain, sorry.
No, there's somebody here who would like to
Wrong, Carol.
Carry on. Why are you teasing me? And they get quiet, I want to say, you want to know what I want to talk about? I want to say, enactments of beauty can become instruments of self-examination, of affirmation, and of celebration. Dream as a fictional narrative has always been a question of trying to understand self, of self-knowledge. Walcott himself stated that our art would find its Andean renewal in folk tale and parable, which for me says that he was aware of what you are talking about, that he was aware of the strength and power of the folk. He was aware of where he should project his work, his gift, his vision, that the use of tradition was critical to making the statements he made. And I want to quote Nettleford, one of my favorite people. Individual protagonists have thrown up classic expressions which have become sources of energy in that vital quest for cultural certitude. Individual protagonists, like Walcott, have thrown up classic expressions which have become prime sources. We could talk about dream for a very long time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good, very good, great, yeah. Ms. Hussain, are you ready? If not, then Keon, we can go on to the next clipping. Carol Hussain, are you there? Clipping. Keon, can we go on to the next clipping, please? Yeah.
I am an instrument of the law, Sui. I got the white man work to do. Besides, if he's crazy, he's dangerous. If he's not, a night in jail would be good for his soul. Hey, King Kong, chow time. Food, old man.
Bring me damn supper, left, right. I have my rights,
Your rights? Huh? Listen, nigga. According to this world, you have the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and 3 green figs. No more, maybe less. I am an...
Oh. Why didn't he show the African scene?
Yes, okay. Thank you. Right, great, yeah. This frozen image there, Dr. LaChapelle, yeah, I found it very, very startling and interesting. The figure at the back with holding the 2
My mic.
there and so on.
Oh, there's Carol.
All right, can you, while we wait for Carol, can you just speak to this image here? That figure at the back there, who is he? What's that figure there that we saw standing with the 2 sticks?
I think he's a god, actually, but it looks like Stephen Hankey, and Stephen Hankey played a number of roles. The sick man, he was probably the main male dancer. So these are the 2 thieves, right? So he's a god. I don't think he's a folk figure.
All right, excellent.
Visually interesting and effective, but yeah, he's a god.
Okay. When I was thinking about Dream on Monkey Mountain and this discussion, one thing that struck me and I wanted us to think about is the relevance of Dream on Monkey Mountain to contemporary society, to contemporary Caribbean thought and ideas. You know, some people might say, well, Dream, that's a history play, that's the past and so on. But you know, the whole figure, the figure of the apparition, the whole discussion about whiteness, the recent discussions we've had about white privilege in the last year and so on. It's interesting that Dream does seem even more relevant today, or as relevant today as it was.
As relevant, I'm agreeing with you. Exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, about a year ago, we had people tearing down white statues, symbols of white civilization, chopping off the heads of some statues and so on. And this is something that Walcott staged in Dream on Monkey Mountain ages ago. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think the message is to go around, and that's why I mentioned symbolism earlier, you know, doing this literally, but certainly the representations and the symbols. And there's some lines there that Lestrade is going to say that hits home, and that is so significant for Makak. If he must be liberated, if he must find himself, if he must reach a space where he's confident in himself, and thinking as well of the Caribbean and us Caribbean people are now placing the world in this space of globalization that is so competitive now in a number of areas, economically, culturally, and so on. Now, where are we now? What is Dream on Monkey Mountain saying to us in terms of our space, our place of comfort, our confidence as a people, and where we reach? Are we still searching for who we are, or are we now comfortable in terms of who we are now, out of all that myriad of influences, you know? Are we reach a space of confidence and comfort from which we can interact and engage as ourselves? These questions are still very burning and very pertinent. So I want us to go to the next scene. Time is running quickly, and then we can speak some more about these issues. Yeah, Keon, thank you.
Don't tell me about the law. Once I loved the law, I thought the law was just, universal, a substitute for God. But the law is a whore. She will adjust her price. In some places, the law doesn't allow you to be black. Not even black, but tinged with black.
And that is what's eating out your soul, Lestrade. That is why you're punishing this old man. You're punishing your own grandfather. Let him go home.
Let me go home. I have money. I have money that I hide. I will pay all of you. Bribery! Listen, you corrupt, obscene, insufferable ape. I am incorruptible. You understand that? Incorruptible. The law is your salvation and mine, you imbecile. This ain't the bush. This ain't Africa. This is not another easygoing nigger you're talking to, but an officer, a servant, and an officer of the law. Not the law of the jungle, but something the white man teach you should be thankful for. Don't.
him.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Keon, go on to the next one as well. I want to try and take in a couple before. Yeah.
It's the African scene, which is a whole dream, which is a whole dream.
Did you feel pity for me? Or horror of them? Believe me, I'm all right. It's only a flesh wound. Times change, don't they? And people change. Even black people. Even slaves. He made his point, you might say. But this is only what they dream of. And before things grow clearer, nearer to their dream of revenge, I must play another part. We'll go hunting the lion. Except they're not lions, just natives. There's nothing quite so exciting as putting down the natives, especially after reason and law have failed. So I let them escape. I let them run ahead. Then I'll have good reason for shooting them down. Sharpville, Soweto. Attempting to escape. Attempting to escape. Attempting to escape from the prison of their lives. That's the most dangerous crime. It brings about revolution. So, off we go, lads. Too late have I loved thee, Africa of my mind. Sero te amave, to cite St. Augustine, who they say was black.
All right. Yes. Thank you. Great. Yes. Right. So, I am coming to theater. Well, certainly at some point I came to theater through cultural studies. And, that whole concept of the panopticon by Foucault, that comes to my mind when I saw Lestrade there with that gun going right around. That scoping of revolutionaries and scoping of black protesters and scoping of runaway slaves, etc. Very important symbol there. Always trying to quell and kill, rebellion against oppression, rebellion against the kind of colonial oppression and discourse, and so on. That came to mind. Something else that comes to mind when I think of Jim on Monkey Mountain, and I want to consider it a classic, is form. And Lestrade being wounded but killed really and getting up and so on. People dying and getting up. The flashbacks and so on. The dream is the whole mode of anti-realism, anti-realistic theater. It's very interesting how at that time Walcott was doing that kind of experiment with form, but was doing it through the folk. Yeah? So going to a kind of creating an anti-realistic theater, but through the folk, which is not too far-fetched because, when you think about Césaire and Césaire's poetry as well, which at that time was seen as surrealistic and so on, And you know, his contemporaries and people who were examining his poetry at that time were reading a lot of European influences, you know, Baudelaire and so on. But you know, in the Caribbean, in our part of the world, we've had through the folklore, we've had surrealism, we've had anti-realism, you know, we've had magic realism. And I think that what is interesting is the way in which Walcott was able to create theater out of our own, which was parallel in some of the theater that was happening. If you think of the advent of modern theater, the symbolism that Strindberg and Ibsen and so on were experimenting with, you know, from their European traditions. Here we have a West Indian writer who was doing something very similar, but out of our own folk culture, out of our own experience, you know, and realizing and acknowledging that rather than copy what they were doing or imitate what they were doing, that he could go and do the same thing that they're doing, but through our own, which I think is a very important statement. And so for me, Dream on Monkey Mountain is also a classic Caribbean play, also in the sense of it's how it has pushed the boundaries of Caribbean theater in terms of creating a form out of our own that rivals some of those happening in modern theater in the European world. So very, very interesting things when you examine Dream on Monkey Mountain. And I think for students of playwriting, yeah, this is also an excellent model, excellent book that they could examine and study what was happening and what is it that he was doing with our culture, with our cultural forms. Yeah. Yes, good. We quickly going out of time, but I really want to give an opportunity to our panelists to really just share for some further reflections on this play, Dream on Monkey Mountain, and their experience.
Can I jump in, please, Travis? Because I haven't got no word in for the evening. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that. I have so many ideas I wanted to share. One of the things I want to put out to you all, just for you to get your response, the character macaque, and looking at Walcott's symbolism in this play, I'm wondering, do you see macaque, the macaque figure representing Hossein, the healer in the Orisha faith? And a reason I'm asking that, he has these fits, as they call it, but it happens on full moon nights, during the full moon, and one wonders if it's supposed to represent a manifestation of sorts, you know. And also I wanted to ask about the symbolism with respect to the insect, the Anansi, the spider, the trickster, you know, and the animal forms that he's used. If you can comment on that. There's so much I want to say, you know, there's so much, but I don't want to take your time because your time is more valuable. What you have to say is more valuable than what I have to say. But yes, if anybody can respond to that, I'd really appreciate.
I think at this point we can have anyone jump in who wants to contribute from the panel to what you're saying. Carol?
I wasn't thinking of, I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'm really guessing here because the understanding of the healer and possession in our culture is well known. So if he has endowed macaque with those healing powers, then healing powers empower him and supports what you were saying earlier. The macaque wasn't, you know, really this low life, that he had his own inner strength, etc., etc. So that's for me in a nutshell. You know, whether Walcott was specifically going into the Orisha or Yoruba faith, I can't answer.
What I was I was thinking about before you asked that question, Carol as in Hossein,
yes.
not Carol as in Lashapa, is that Dream on Monkey Mountain is a spiritscape, you know, so it's not, I wouldn't locate it in Hossein. I never thought of this, the one you just said that I said, I never thought of macaque in that way. But I do think of the play as a spiritscape where it goes between worlds almost, so that one can find oneself. So I think that's a way in which the spiritual becomes a very potent foundation for the play. And then the other thing I was noting of one of the clips, and bringing it back to something Travis was saying about how do we look at Dream on Monkey Mountain today? Well, Lestrade referred with a gun in his hand to Sharpeville and Soweto, which are points of violence within our contemporary history. And then in our more recent history, we have last year with George Floyd. Before that, Ahmaud Arbery, Sandra Bland, just name it, right? Okay, so that it's interesting that those words would bring the mention of Sharpeville and Soweto brought that very close to home back in the 90s, right? And so, you know, you could think that could just be replaced with whatever location it could be replaced with the Texas border now.
Interesting what you, Sonia,
right?
because in reviewing the play just today, it was only Sharpeville, and I remember we added in Soweto
in the
90s.
Right.
And if we do it today, we could probably add in.
Yes, exactly.
So I think that you asked about the relevance today.
Yeah.
And I think about Lestrade in particular, as the problematic, you know, Black figure in this whole piece, because, you know, as I said, macaque is macaque, and we see him as a monkey, but he's a proud, majestic figure. Moustique is a trickster. The use of the animal names, Teague and Suri, the two thieves, tiger and rat. Then you have Lestrade, the straddler, the one in the middle. And when he was, and Teague calls him out, he says, "You're just a red nigger." You know, and that is Lestrade's problem. And one of the things, as you spoke about, Kendall, was about Walcott having to almost pick a side in the 70s, right? And I think that red dilemma is still one of the dilemmas we're faced with in these parts. And it's one of the biggest issues in the whole piece, actually, this role of this red man. And there's a little line in Body Twilight says, where he says, "When we choose to give up our whiteness, where it is. Once we have lost our wish to be white, we develop longing to become Black. And those two may be different, but are still careers." So this is a big experimental piece with some really serious, heavy topics, from history to civil rights, to Garvey, to even, as we say, contemporary issues and the various Black responses to it. And I was also intrigued by how much Lestrade says, "I am an instrument of the law," you know, and he speaks to this the salvation that he hoped to get from, you know, the white education that these niggers refuse to take on board. And then when he flips, then he wants to get rid of everything white. So,
interestingly, that you're saying that, Manwaring, the Lestrade character, he is the law and he knows everything about the law, but yet he says all on Sunday, which to me the playwright wants to show that he's not all that. He's an arm of the colonists. But he's not all
he's
that.
a little village policeman in a little village. I mean, the real story is so simple. It's so simple. And as I say, for me as an actor, I just engage the story on that level, play it on that level.
He's just well trained. He's just well trained, and he's doing his job, and he's a mouthpiece.
But look at him in the end. You know, in the end, he says, you know, he calls Felix Aubert his name. He tells him, you know, he mashed up the place, but it's okay, just sleep it off.
He's so wonderful in the end.
Yeah, he's
all right. Well, I think I just have a couple of seconds to say thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I want to really thank people. I want to thank Mr. Louis Williams for his usual support, our head of department, always very supportive. I certainly want to thank Brendan Lakai for assisting with the poster and marketing, and Keon, a technical guy, always willing to help. and Carol for coming on board with us. The CFA, the entire DCFA staff, Joseph Drayton, for making sure we got the poster right. Our esteemed panel for giving up their time. I know that you're very busy, and so really, really grateful for giving your time. I think that we're going to keep this and just be sure that you will be assisting with the younger generation of theater artists, etc., and students when they listen back and they get some more insight into this Caribbean classic. I am happy for Dream on Monkey Mountain, because finally in the end, Macaque can say his name. He is Felix Hubert. He has never killed a fly. He's a simple, ordinary man, and he can assert himself with even if he's poor. He's accepted himself for who he is, and he does not need any validation from anywhere. He's a Caribbean man within this space. He has all his inheritance, his heritage, and he can act from there and be proud of himself as a Caribbean man and speak to the world.
And he going home.
I believe in
He's going home.
Anybody thinking of doing it?
I know.
Best speech ever.
And I cannot sleep.
Is there anybody thinking of doing Dream?
General Rat.
All night with no sleep.
Aye.
Your name is Hubert. I must mark that on the charge.
Charge?
What charge?
Drill him, constable. Drill.
So bad.
All right. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you very, very, very much. God bless you. Do have a splendid evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks again, Alison.
Welcome, Carol.
Bye.